All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a little bit now of the student resources. And of course, the biggest one that you're going to want to take a look at is the text and their notebook and something called a lesson game. And then I'll show you how to create an assessment, and then we'll show you all about grading. So let's do this first. We'll start with the text. So this lesson activity is all about the error of reform. Well, we saw at different points in my little slide deck that it was referring to the text, or sometimes you may even see direct links that will open up the text. Your students can also get access to it directly from their sidebar, or when you create an assignment, they can click on a link that will take them right there too. I'm going to click on it directly from the sidebar. It doesn't matter. One's not necessarily better than the other. So I clicked on text right here, and this is the chapter for 18. Now, our middle school programs, so that's grade 6, 7, and 8, they currently do have two different reading levels. And there is a way in which you can toggle between level A, which means it's written on grade level and within the middle school Lexile range, or down to level B, which is roughly about 75% of a middle school Lexile range. Really kind of puts it up at about the 5th grade reading level. Currently, that A and B is only in our middle school products. There is plans that will do that for high school, and once that happens, it would be available for those of you who teach high school to be able to use. Now, that's not the only reading accessibility tool that TCI has. So let me go further, because even if you teach high school and you don't have that different reading level, don't worry. But I will say one other thing about the reading level is the way it's set by default, your students could choose level A or B. They can choose between English and Spanish, but you do have the ability in your settings to go in and lock a student into either English or Spanish. You could, if you're a middle school teacher, lock them into a level A or B. So you do have the ability to change those things depending on what you want for an individual student. So the first one, it is the text or the leveling tool. All these others are ones that everybody has. So for example, you have text to audio.
An era of reform. To what extent did the reform movements of the mid-1800s improve life for Americans?
So the word track, as the sentence is read, it'll be highlighted. As the word within the sentence is read, it'll be blue. Their text itself, it is the exact same text that would be in the print edition. The only difference are these features that make it more interactive, such as they can click on the images and they can analyze the details in the images with a little magnifying glass that's there. If they're in a section of text, let's move on. You can see right here in this section on the spirit of reform that I've actually marked up my book, because the students do have a markup tool. What happens is they can highlight any word or words and then assign it any of these different colors. And any of their markups, they automatically get saved by chapter in a section in their reference area called My Notes. So you can actually see my markups right here that I've made as a teacher. The students have this exact tool. In fact, the view that I'm looking at here as a teacher is exactly what students see when they're using their online text. So there's that markup tool. And the one that I skipped over, which I really love, I'm going to go to a section that I haven't used the markup for yet, which I think is section 3. Let me show you why I like this one right here. Now, it's not a text leveling tool per se, but it is a tool that will definitely help your struggling readers, because what it is it's a main idea viewer. And what you do is you click it, and I'll zoom in so that you can see it. It will bold just the key sentences that are in that section of text, so that they're able to kind of set that apart from all of the other information that's there. So when you're thinking about, as a teacher, what's the testable content, it's all in those main ideas is where we put it. Now, again, they can click on the images, the maps, the charts, the graphs, any of that is all clickable. And anytime they encounter a key content term, so I don't see one in that particular section, but let me back up. Yep, right here. So one of the key terms that we have right there is devoted. Watch what happens when I click that. It will auto-populate the definition in line for my students. So these tools work exactly the same way, regardless of the program that you have in both English and in Spanish. So the entire program is right there. Questions about the text before I talk a little bit about the notebook. All right, so I'm going to go back to my text here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll a little bit further down in one of these sections so that I can show you some of the other things that are there when the students are using their text/reading. As they scroll down, they may encounter what we call a check for understanding. This is a formative assessment that doesn't report to you as a teacher. It's meant to be a sandbox. It's meant to give the students an opportunity to drag and drop, to answer in a multiple choice question based on what they've just read up there, and check their answers on their own understanding, on their own terms, and even reset it and keep trying again until they get it right without consequence. There are lots of formative assessment that does go to you, that is scored, but this is one that if they encounter, because it's not in every section, that if they encounter a check for understanding, we put it there because there's typically a lot of text and we want to give them an opportunity to be able to check their own understanding before we move on and take content related notes. Now, I talked before when we were doing the slide deck that there are options for both print and online when it comes to the students taking notes. Well, what I see at the very bottom of my page is the online version of the notes. It's interactive in that the students, if it's a writing prompt, they can type right there. If it's a drawing prompt, they can, draw right there, or add a text box and type it in, reshape it if they need. Move that one out of the way. I can reshape this text. I can turn it. I can move it around. I can change different kinds. So in other words, I've got all these different little markup tools that I can use if it's a drawing prompt. So whatever the student needs to be able to answer the prompts for their notebook, we put right inside their TCI account. So if you want your students to do their notes online, you don't have to publish anything to Canvas or anything like that. When they go into their account, they'll be able to do it in TCI right there. And it saves automatically. So roughly about every second and a half, their work is saved, a lot like Google saves a document. Now, my version as a teacher, I'm able to view an answer key. They don't have that quick access to an answer key. They would get their feedback from me. And I'll show you what it looks like on the teacher side in just a few minutes. So hold questions on that. I just want to point out that the notebook and the textbook, they really kind of go hand in hand together as the students are using it in a TCI lesson. They'll have their notes at a point of need right at the bottom of that section. So they just scroll right on down and they're able to get to it there. And they can navigate to the next section a number of different ways, at the top, at the bottom. Now, as a teacher, at any point when you see these little icons right here, these are things that you can use as a teacher. So for example, let's say that you're using one of our custom programs where there's not a hardbound edition that's specific to all of the lessons in one place, and you've got a kid in your class that doesn't have equitable access at home. You want to make sure that they can take the chapter at home without having to print something off or download it. Well, you can click the print here at school. They can download a PDF and they can have that text for offline viewing, or if you wanted to print it out, you absolutely could. If I want to assign my students something, anytime I see this little calendar icon or any calendar, or I click on assignments from my sidebar, I can actually assign something to my students. And it's really simple. So for example, I'm going to click on create assignment right there, and it will pre-populate, hey, he's wanting to assign section 3 to his students. I can then determine who I want to assign it to, when I want it to be due, or if I want to schedule something for later. I can even create a window of time. When I create a test, for example, I can have a test open only for the hour that the students are sitting in my class if I want. By default, you always have to give it a due date. So I'm going to say it's got to be due by tomorrow at midnight. And I have the option of enforcing a due date, which means that after that date and time passes, the students would not be able to add to their work. Now, they'll still be able to see what they've done, but they won't be able to add to it. For the most part, I don't recommend scheduling things for later or enforcing the due date outside of assessments, because basically what you would be saying is, I don't want my students to read ahead, and I don't want my students to improve their work otherwise. Now, teaching is a private practice. You can go about it any way that you want, and you do have access to be able to change those. But outside of an assessment where I only want my students to have access to the test for that time, and I don't want them to go and change it after they leave the class, that's where I would kind of use these two things. So you can get really specific, or you can kind of leave it a little bit more broad like this. Just click assign there at the end. When you create an assignment for your students, you'll see that little check mark right there, and you can actually go over to your assignments tab in your sidebar, and it will show this is what it looks like to a student when they're logged into an account. They'll see their assignment. They'll be able to click a hyperlink. It will take them right to where you wanted them to complete that work. So it's super, super simple to assign the students the text. And you can do it easily right at the point of need, or you can click assignments and you can do everything from scratch where you are picking, whoops, didn't mean to click filter there. You can pick the lesson. You can pick what you want to assign. We've been looking at just the text so far, but there's two other things that we'll see here too. A lesson game, for example, and then I can assign it specifically to who I want. It could be all classes. It could be one class. It could be one student, groups of students. You have full godlike control on your assignments within TCI. Let me share just a quickly, because I know we've only got about 7 minutes or so left, and I want to be able to highlight one of the other big questions that I think teachers will have is, all right, how do I handle assessment with TCI? What are my options with it? So there's two things that I want to show you really quickly. One is that at the end of every chapter, there is what we call a lesson game. A lesson game is meant to challenge the students' reading comprehension and what they know about the main ideas of the chapter itself. They answer questions, they get immediate feedback, they get up to 2 attempts before they are told what the correct response is, or if they get it right on the second attempt, they'll get half credit. The data that is collected as they play this game come to you as a teacher in your online grade book. Now, I don't have a class in there that I can show, but I do in a completely different account. So I'll show that real quickly so that you see what a grade book would look like. The grades, essentially, when they come to you, you're able to, for that lesson game, there'll be a column that's set up specifically for that lesson game. You'll be able to drill in and see exactly what students have answered as a question. You can reset the score. It's all dated and time-stamped. Or you can even do an item analysis as a class and see what percentage of your students answered those questions correctly. When the students do work in their notebook, there'll be a column for it in your grade book. You'll be able to go in and open up and see exactly what they've put in as their answers. You'll have an answer key there. It will be dated and timestamped. You've got options on grading by question, grading by whole notebook at the time, and it's all going to be up. If you want to practice all of that, don't forget, go up here in this help area here. And when you're in help, I really want to encourage you to check out this assignments, grading, and sharing area. Now, the last thing I'm going to show you, another assessment feature would be the idea of just building a summative assessment. So you've got lots of choices there. When you click on assessments over on your sidebar, based on chapter, you'll have a question bank, 2 pre-made tests that you could actually open up and look at. All right, when TCI wrote this lesson, what did their assessment look like when they wrote the lesson? But you're not married into it. You can actually use our questions, but modify them and create your very own test from scratch. And you can create as many tests as you want, and you can assign them to a specific student, groups of students, whole classes, all of your classes. Doesn't matter. You can give every test online or you can give it in print. And it's a lot like grading a notebook if you give it online, in the sense that if it's an open-ended item, where you would go in and you would view a student response and be able to award them points, it's similar to the notebook in that way, but it's also similar to the lesson game in that if there's closed-ended items, multiple choice, fill in the blank, the computer will score those automatically. So it'll save you that kind of time. And again, you don't have to do it online. You can print it out and you can give it to your students. And like I said, you can create as many tests as you want, and they will save year after year, however long you have access to the program. Now, with the time that we have left, there's a couple things I want to make sure that I draw your eyes to. One is back to that help area, because like I said, this was meant to get you started, get you some basic awareness of how to get in there and move around, but you're going to have next level types of questions. Some of you already do. You can go into the help area and probably find what you need right off the bat there. But there's always professional development on demand right from our website. So at the top of our main website, you're going to see this little link for professional development. In fact, I'm going to put the direct link to it into the chat for everyone so that you can click to it and get there. And what we put inside this professional development area is access to be able to take self-paced courses, to be able to attend live webinars, and to also access our webinar library.